This is my full sourdough process, the exact one I use between snack requests and toddler interruptions. It's beginner friendly, easy to master, and I'm dropping all the tips I wish I knew when I started. The best tip I ever received as a beginner was to get to know your dough. Pick a manageable recipe with a low hydration and master it before changing what you're doing. Sourdough is just flour, water, starter, and salt, no matter what recipe you use. Pick one and get to know it. I start with my initial mix, starter, water, and flour. Like I said, this is a low hydration recipe, meaning the ratio of water to flour is fairly low and makes the dough very manageable, especially when you're just learning. I learned with a low hydration recipe and rarely ever touch high hydration because once you master it, you'll be baking perfect bread without sticky, wet dough and fancy maneuvers.
Dump it in.
For this video, I doubled my recipe to make 2 loaves, so I used 540 grams of filtered room temperature water, 200 grams of active starter at peak, and 780 grams of flour. I'll leave the recipe in the description for a single and double loaf. The process is identical either way. Every loaf starts with patience, precision, and a toddler stealing my dough whisk.
Dara mix now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not going for a smooth dough on my initial mix, but well incorporated. Once it's all mixed up, I cover it, set a timer for 30 minutes, and then weigh my 16 grams of salt so I don't forget to add it on my first stretch and fold. I technically aim for 30 minutes between stretch and folds, but I'm pregnant and parenting a toddler, so between tantrums and pee breaks, time is more of a suggestion. I'll just let you decide whose tantrums and pee breaks I'm talking about. On the first stretch and fold, I add my salt and basically just work it into the dough by kneading it until it feels fully incorporated. The dough will start to firm up and smooth out in the process. I also recommend keeping your hands wet during stretch and fold so the dough doesn't stick to them. At the end of each stretch and fold, I take the temperature of my dough, write that down, cover it up, and let it rest another 30 minutes-ish. More on the dough temperature soon, it'll all make sense in a minute, I promise. For the rest of the stretch and folds, I do coil folds. This is where you gently pull the dough up and fold it over itself. Turn the container and then repeat a few times, working your way around the dough until it tightens up. You'll really see the dough start to come together in this process.
Say rain, roll, rain.
Again, I temp my dough at the end of the coil folds, cover it, and let it rest another 30 minutes.
Friday.
I do coil folds for the third stretch as well. This is way easier in a bowl rather than a cambro like I'm doing here, but I had several doughs on the go, no free bowls, and using a straight-sided container is helpful for the rise anyway. I temp my dough again, write down the temperature, and let it rest 30 minutes until my last stretch and fold. The fourth and final stretch and fold is another set of coil folds. At this point, you should have a very cohesive, smooth, elastic, and shiny dough with a few bubbles.
Sunday? Yesterday was Sunday. It's not Saturday. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Sunday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
This time I temp my dough and average out all the temperatures of the last couple hours of stretch and folds. Mine was sitting just above 73 degrees on average, so I referenced this handy chart which has proven to be very accurate for the starter ratio I use. Based on this chart, I can assume my dough will take around 8.5 hours and need to rise between 55 and 60%. If you're a beginner, don't even worry about the rise percentage yet. Time your dough based on a chart like this, and that skill will come as you get to know your dough. I added 8.5 hours from the time my dough was mixed, which was 8:50 a.m. This tells me that around 5:20 p.m. my dough should be ready to shape and go in the fridge. Keep in mind that dough temperatures can fluctuate throughout the day, so if you want to be even more accurate, you can temp your dough as it's rising. I started pre-shaping this dough around 5 o'clock. I could have started earlier, but I was in the middle of making dinner and evenings are chaos with the toddler. But also, it's better to let your dough go a little longer than you think rather than underproofing it. Underproof dough will create a really dense, gummy, unsatisfying loaf of bread, while overproof dough will typically still be soft and airy even if it loses a little bit of its gluten structure and falls a little flatter. I have a few different pre-shaping methods I use depending on the structure of the dough. Pre-shaping is also optional. You can just shape your dough. The humidity in your house can affect the stickiness of your dough as well, so in this case I wanted a little more tightness in my dough, so opted to stretch it slightly before shaping it in a ball. You can also just gently coax your dough into a ball without the extra stretching step. I can do a full video on shaping another time. In this case I was making 2 loaves, so I just repeated this process with the second loaf. Pre-shaping helps the dough hold its structure and makes the final shaping way easier. Think of it as a little practice round that tightens up the gluten a bit before the real deal. After pre-shaping, I let it rest 30 minutes before the final shape. Just before my final shaping, I seasoned my Bannetons with a generous dusting of rice flour so the dough doesn't stick to them. I don't recommend using flour for shaping because it can create weird pockets in your dough and affect hydration, so if it's sticky, just use damp hands and slightly wet the surface of your dough. Don't wet it too much or it'll slide around rather than building tension. For a batard or oval shape, I just flip the ball over, pull in the corners, and roll it into a log. Then I gently pull the dough toward me to tighten the surface and give the ends a little tuck in between to keep it uniform. For a boule or a circle shape, I just flip the ball over, pull in all the corners, and then coax it into a tight ball with this push-pull method. You want to build surface tension on top of the dough without tearing it. Once it feels tight, you're good. Don't overdo it. Once shaped, put your dough into the Banneton and let it rest for another 30 minutes covered. Or you can move it straight to the fridge. The next step is actually optional. After that 30-minute rest, I like to stitch my dough. This just helps to maintain its shape, build a little more surface tension, help with even air distribution, and arguably gives a better oven spring. For stitching, I just pull the edges and corners inward to create a seam. Stitching a boule is a little different, but again, you're just pulling the corners inward to meet the opposite side. It's important that you're not grabbing too much dough, but just enough to make a tense little ball. I don't know why, but I always think this looks like some kind of Pokemon. Does that make sense? Probably not. Again, I dust that one in rice flour, and then I tuck them both in for the night to cold proof. The next morning, I preheat my Dutch oven at 500 degrees for at least 45 minutes. Every oven is different, so don't be afraid to try a few baking methods until you find what really works for you. I use a pan under my Dutch oven because the bottom heat in my oven is really intense. The main thing is that you start baking with a lot of heat for that initial oven spring. Once the oven is almost ready, I take my dough out of the fridge and start scoring. Decorative scoring is optional, but I love the art of it. After all that work, my loaf better be pretty. I decided to show 2 different scoring methods here and compare both, so stay tuned for that separate video as well. For this loaf, I did my decorative scoring and didn't do my expansion score until 7 minutes into baking. I love doing simple wheat stock designs. If you want to see more on scoring and how to score decoratively, I have a lot of shorts on this. To bake, I put the dough in my hot Dutch oven, covered it, and lowered the oven to 450 degrees. After 7 minutes, I did my expansion score. I baked covered for 35 minutes, so after the 7-minute score, I set a timer for 28 more minutes. Then I uncover it and bake it for 10 more minutes. I recommend taking the temperature of your bread at the end of the bake, especially when you're first figuring out your oven and dough. A fully cooked loaf will read between 205 and 210 degrees Fahrenheit. Once the first loaf was done, I threw my Dutch oven back in the oven with the lid on and turned it back up to 500 degrees to heat it back up while I got my second loaf ready. I scored this loaf in a more beginner-friendly, simple way by doing my expansion score before putting it in the oven. I did my decorative scoring, my expansion score, and then moved it to the hot Dutch oven. For this method, I typically reduce the heat to 450, bake for 35 minutes covered and 10 minutes uncovered. I actually forgot to reduce the heat this time, so I ended up with a pretty dark crust, but it was still so good. Rookie mistake, even experienced bakers mess up sometimes. Always let your loaves cool at least an hour before cutting to allow the crumb to fully set. You can ruin a perfect loaf by cutting it right away. I know after what feels like hours of work, it's tempting to cut into that fresh, warm bread, but the wait will be worth it. The good news is, after an hour, it's typically still a little warm inside, but not hot enough to burn your hands and ruin your hard work. If you can smell this through the screen, that's sourdough calling you to start your own chaos. And that's it, my full sourdough process, start to finish. It seems complicated because there's a lot of knowledge to take in, but I promise once you try it step by step, it's simple, beginner friendly, and completely doable, even with one hand in the dough and the other catching a flying sippy cup.